Hey friends, and welcome to Roaming Taste Videos. Today we are making wild apple cornbread. This cornbread is actually a Native American recipe, so for anyone who is looking to make a cornbread recipe for that table spread and those special events coming up, wild apple cornbread recognizes those who lived and thrived on North American soil long before any foreigners came to be. This is a super duper easy recipe. It's really moist, isn't too sweet actually, so it would go great with all those savory options, and I would love if you could give it a go. If you do, let me know in the comments below, tag me on Instagram at Roaming Taste, subscribe for more videos like this, and to get the full recipe, follow the link in the caption below, and if you do give it a go, it would be great if you could review so that more people can find this recipe.
We'll want to line a baking tin with greaseproof paper and preheat our oven to 200 degrees Celsius or 400 degrees Fahrenheit before we get started. Now we want to place that cornmeal, sugar, buttermilk, all that buttermilk, and our melted butter into a large heat-proof bowl. And we want to stir that until it is fully combined and smooth. You'll probably notice as you stir this that there is like hidden lumps there, so just keep at it until you have a nice smooth homogeneous mixture, and you'll notice that all that buttermilk will just kind of disappear, and a nice bright yellow color will be very evident throughout. Once we have done that, we will want to place that heat-proof bowl into some warm or lightly simmering water. I'd recommend the heat to be about 2 to 3, so low to medium on your saucepan, and you want the water to not touch the bottom of your bowl. We want to heat this nice and softly so that it thickens, and you'll notice there'll be more resistance as you stir, cooking it for that 10 minutes. Now let's get into apples. You will notice shortly as I peel my apples that I am using Granny Smith apples in my recipe, because wild apples can be quite hard to source if you live in the city, or if you don't have an apple orchard down the road with more traditional old school types of apples. After doing some research, I discovered that the only type of wild apples native in North America are crab apples, and they are often small and quite tart, so traditionally not very sweet. That is what we're looking for when we talk about wild apples. This recipe is one way Native Americans could use a produce such as crab apples to incorporate into their diet without having to snack on these super tart, not very sweet produce and still get nutrients. And they add such a great flavor because they're not super sweet. This cornbread is still super mild and is great to incorporate alongside anything savory you might traditionally serve cornbread with. In fact, I would go so far as saying this probably would make a traditional chili even better because of that apple. Anyway, once we have this needs 10 minutes, so I really sped it up to try and just cut down on time, otherwise it's kind of like watching paint dry. But once we have noticed that the mixture is thickened, it's the consistency is also slightly it's a little bit like porridge, and then it has thickened. There is resistance on your spoon, and you'll notice it will go from being really loose on the edges of your bowl to begin to sticking to the edges of your bowl, and that slight, if you don't stir it towards the last couple of minutes towards the end of the cooking, that it will stick. So once you take it off the heat, make sure that you stir it thoroughly to get the edges fully have the cooler air circulate. Set that aside, and now we get to peeling in grating our apples. Once again, I have gone for some like 2 medium apples. What we're really looking for is 1 cup of grated apple flesh. So the peel and the cores get completely disregarded here, and we just want that flesh. And 2 medium granny smith apples will provide you with 1 cup. If you're using wild apples, I'd probably recommend at least 3 because they are traditionally a bit smaller. You'll only see me peel and grate 1 apple here, but do not worry, we want to repeat the same steps with our second apple. And once we have grated as much flesh as possible off them, we want to set them aside, and we want to make sure we do not waste any of that apple. We also do not want to grate our apples too early before adding to the cornmeal. We want to really just do this just prior so that they do not start to brown, because we don't use anything to kind of preserve that apple flesh from browning prior to adding it. So we can set that aside very briefly, and then we want to incorporate the water and baking soda together. That water is cold, so the baking soda is really not going to completely dissolve, but we can add that into our cornbread mix along with the lightly beaten eggs, the salt, and our grated apples. And once we do this, it does not take long to incorporate. You'll see that thanks to those eggs, this mixture, though it will have been quite thick after we cooked it, it will form a sort of batter thanks to those eggs and a little bit, I guess, of the liquid from the grated apples weaving its way through that mixture. Once we've fully incorporated that and ensure that there's no little patches at the bottom of our bowl of eggs or unmixed apples, we are ready to put that into our baking tin. As you can see, it's incredibly thick, but it still is loose enough to kind of like slide out of our bowl into our baking tin. And we will want to smooth that out nice and evenly, pushing all of the batter into all the corners of our baking tin and making sure it's nice and even on top. This won't rise too much during baking, and we will want to place it in the oven to bake for 30 minutes until it's ever so lightly golden on top, and more importantly, a skewer comes out clean. We'll want to remove that and allow it to cool until it's just lightly warm, and then we want to slice it nice and evenly. You see there's little bits of grated apple on my knife there. I apportioned it into 16 squares, but you can cut it however you like. It is a pretty decent slice or square of cornbread at serving time. And I must recommend this when it is ready to be served, that you do serve it with a drizzle of ideally, wild honey. I highly recommend it. I really hope you enjoy this, friends.